Good morning, remote learners. We are on page 99. Okay. Finishing up on the inner planets, and then you'll have some videos to watch and some questions to answer tonight. Okay. All right. You can see up there at the top on page 99 the size of Earth compared to Uranus. Okay, we're rather small. It is a gas giant. It is a big planet. Okay, it's about 4 times the diameter of Earth. Okay, which means 4 Earths would fit across the face of it. It's still much smaller than Jupiter and Saturn. Okay, it is twice as far from the sun as Saturn, so it's obviously very cold. Okay. Uranus looks blue-green because of traces of methane in its atmosphere. As a methane gas. Like the other gas giants, it is surrounded by a group of thin, flat rings, and although they are much darker than Saturn rings, okay? Remember, Saturn still has what we consider the primo rings around it, although they all do have rings. Okay. It was discovered in around 1781. Uranus became the first new planet discovered since ancient times. Okay. You had a guy named William Herschel in England found a fuzzy object in the sky that didn't look like a star. And at first he thought it might be a comet, but it soon proved to be a planet beyond Saturn. Okay, and the discovery made him famous, and he started an era of actively searching the solar system for other planets and beyond stars and things beyond that. Okay, about 200 years after Herschel's discovery, Voyager 2 arrives at Uranus and sends back close-up views of the planet. Okay. Images from Voyager 2 shows only a few clouds on Uranus' surface, but even these few clouds allows astronomers to calculate that it rotates on its axis about every 17 hours. So Earth is 24 hours, Uranus is about every 17 hours, but it takes it 84 years to go around the sun. 84 years to make a complete orbit around the sun. So if you were there, that's about the average life expectancy probably of people. Okay? So that means you would see 4 seasons. If you lived there in your lifetime, 1 year would go by, you would see 4 seasons, and they would each last somewhere around 21 years each. That's a long winter.
Wow. If you were...
Yes. Stop talking, please.
So, when you see Uranus' orbit, like on, in that bottom square below the possible coloration or whatever,
Yep.
would every side still get, light because it's going that way, and it's orbital floating this way?
Well, that's because that's why the seasons would last so long, because it spins fast, but it takes a long time to go around. So it's like when it's further out, and it would be winter time. It would be winter time for 21 years as it finished up that part of the orbit. Yeah. Yes, Leo.
Isn't Uranus like 4 planets across 4 Earths or something like that?
I'm sorry, is it what?
4 like planets, Earths across.
Yes.
I was just making sure.
Yes, it is. Yeah, he asked about how many Earths would fit across it. Okay. Yes, you are correct. Okay. Now, of course, you know it axis is tilted at an angle of about 90 degrees. Okay. So instead of it doing this, it does this. It goes from top to bottom. Okay. Really, yeah. So, Uranus rings and moons rotate around this tilted axis. Astronomers think that billions of years ago, something hit it and knocked it off kilter, and that's why it rotates that way instead of, or this way instead of this way. It's funny, I guess because I do believe God created the heaven, the universe, everything in it. I always get tickled that people will come up with these theories on why things work like this, and they will buy in, and they will believe that, and yet they'll laugh at me because I go, no, I think God created it. Okay, but I don't know about you, but something big enough, if something was big enough to hit that planet and knock it on its side, so it does this, wouldn't it destroy
Yeah.
the planet?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Exactly.
a serious impact.
Like, unless it unless it was so much bigger than it was now, then like.
Yeah.
Plus, wouldn't scientists be able to see that thing? It must have been pretty
You
big.
would think, but I mean, it's all theory, and they do, that's why it is theory. All right, now, photographs from Voyager 2 shows that Uranus' 5 largest moons have icy cratered surfaces. The crater shows that rocks from space have hit the moon. Uranus moons also have lava flow on their surface, which suggests that materials has erupted from inside each moon. So there was, at some point in time, there was active volcanoes there. Not on Uranus, it's a gas planet, but on the moons. Voyager 2 images reveals 10 moons that had never been seen before, which brings the total of moons for Uranus up to at least 27. Okay, at least 27.
Wait, ours says 25, whereas yours later.
Some books say 25, some books say it's 27.
Is it because
We discovered that in the last class. It is 27. It's up to 27.
Can I cross it out or no?
You can change that. If you want to change that from 25 to 27, you have my permission. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'll write it and know this is, it's okay if I say.
Just mark through it and put 25. You don't need to write a novel in the bottom of the book. Okay. All right. Now, up on page 100, up at the top there, you see Neptune. It shows a picture of Neptune, and it shows the great dark spot was a giant storm, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Neptune's atmosphere. White clouds, probably made of methane ice crystals, can also be seen in that photo. Okay, that's an actual photo of Neptune. Okay, and you can see the size of Neptune and Earth there compared. Again, we're rather small compared to it. Okay, Neptune is even further out from the sun than Uranus. In some ways, Uranus and Neptune look like twins. Okay, they are very similar in size and color. Neptune is a cold blue planet. Its atmosphere does contain visible clouds. Scientists think that Neptune, up in the picture there, is slowly shrinking, okay, causing its interior to heat up. As this energy rises towards Neptune's surface, it's producing clouds and storms in the planet's atmosphere. So they think it is slowly shrinking over the course of time. Okay? Now, this is really cool how they discovered this thing. Neptune was discovered as a result of using math.
Math?
Math.
No.
Okay? Astronomers noted that Uranus was not quite following the orbit that was predicted for it. So they hypothesized that the gravity of an unseen planet was affecting it. Okay? It was affecting the orbit. So in 1846, you had mathematicians in England and France had calculated the orbit of an unseen planet. They didn't have a telescope strong enough at that point in time to see it. Okay? So they did all the calculations, and they figured out where they thought this thing would be setting if it did indeed exist. And when a telescope was built that was strong enough to see that far out, there it was. right where these guys said it would be using math. Okay, and this is in 1846. So they're using, okay, that's a pretty serious calculation going on there. They didn't have a computer to plug all this into or anything. This was just some very smart people. Okay.
And a lot of parchment.
Okay. As for Neptune, in 1989, Voyager 2 flew by Neptune and photographed a giant dark spot about the size of Earth. And like the giant red spot on Jupiter, the giant dark spot was probably a giant storm. But that storm didn't last long. So images taken 5 years later shows that the giant dark spot was gone. Okay? And other smaller spots in regions of clouds on Neptune has also come and gone. So its atmosphere produces storms, but they don't last forever and ever and ever. They just kind of like a storm will come up and then it goes away, and then another storm will come up.
Yeah, not like the ones on
Jupiter. Yeah, on Jupiter. Not like the ones on Jupiter that has been going on for hundreds of years.
And we'll go on for infinity.
Yeah. Okay, Neptune's moons. Astronomers have discovered at least 13 moons orbiting Neptune. The largest moon is Triton, which has a thin atmosphere. The Voyager image shows that the region near Triton's south pole is actually covered by nitrogen ice. Okay, but you expect that being that far out and away from the sun, you're going to get anything that would be a liquid is going to be frozen. Okay,
Only thing that would be a gas is going to be
can be. Okay, the size of Pluto. Now, let's see, Saturn. We didn't. Neptune. It takes about 16 hours to rotate on its axis. It takes 165 years for it to make one revolution around the sun. 165 years. That's how far out this thing is. That's a long time.
pretty decent.
Yeah. On page 101, you see the size of Pluto compared to Earth. Okay.
And then imagine Earth compared to Jupiter.
Yeah, compares Earth and Jupiter there. So you're starting to get to understand why it might be considered a dwarf planet. Pluto is very different from the gas giant. It does have a solid surface. It's much smaller and denser than the outer planets. In fact, Pluto is actually smaller than the Earth's moon. Okay, but Pluto has 3 moons of its own. The largest of these is Charon, which is more than half of Pluto's size. So one of its largest moon is almost as big as it is. Okay? So Pluto is so far from the sun that it revolves around the sun once every 248 Earth years.
Okay.
Okay? So Pluto's orbit is very elliptical. In fact, at one point in time, as it is nearing the sun on its orbit, it's actually kind of almost cuts in front of Neptune, and it's actually closer to the sun at that point than Neptune is. But then it shoots back out again and is forever out there. But at one point in time, it actually cuts back in, and it's closer to the sun than Neptune
Would
is.
it create an eclipse for Neptune?
It might very well might. It very well might. Yes?
Yeah, so it says that the moon is actually about the size of Pluto, that they think it might be another dwarf planet.
Yep.
That the moon might be another dwarf planet? That's actually a pretty good
It's got a criteria that it has to meet in order to be considered a planet, which is why Pluto got downgraded to dwarf planet, because it didn't meet all the criteria once they changed those. Okay? Until recently, Pluto was considered to be the 9th planet in the solar system. Pluto was always thought to be something of an oddball, bless its little heart, because its small size and unusual orbit. Then in recent years, they discovered many icy objects beyond Neptune's orbit, and some of these were fairly similar to Pluto in size and makeup, following the discovery of the body that is even larger and further from the sun than Pluto. they decided to create a new class of objects called dwarf planets. And a dwarf planet is like a planet around, it's round, orbits the sun, but unlike a planet, it has not cleared out the neighborhood around its orbit. So they classify Pluto and two other bodies as dwarf planets, okay? Poor little Pluto got downgraded.
It used to be my favorite.
A lot of, oddly enough, a lot of people were upset when it got
Yeah, I'm
downgraded to a
very
dwarf.
upset that it should not be
Okay.
Morgan.
Hope you enjoyed a little bit of that, and again, we're gonna watch the videos. I will put the links in there for you guys.